probably one of the most famous instances of song that we see in the New Testament is found in the book of Acts, where Paul and Silas are in prison. And starting to read in verse 22, it says, "The crowd rose up together against them, and the chief magistrates tore their robes off them and proceeded to order them to be beaten with rods. And when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to guard them securely. And he, having received such a command, threw them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns of praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them." Sometimes I think when we think about this story, it almost comes across in our minds like Paul and Silas were sort of bored sitting there in prison. They didn't have a whole lot else to do, so they decided to sing. But from the verses that we just read, you can see that Paul and Silas were beaten severely. Their singing was not just to pass the time. It was a cry of their heart in the midst of suffering. And it doesn't just say that they were singing songs of lament. It says that they were singing songs of praise to God. And sometimes in the midst of suffering, singing songs of praise is the best thing that we can do, because it helps us to remember the eternal. It helps us to remember that our suffering is temporal. It helps us to remember that there's a God who's in control. It helps us to remember that there is a God who has good plans for us and who loves us. And so Paul and Silas were singing in the midst of their suffering. And Luke, who's writing the book of Acts, puts in this detail that I think is important. Luke says, "And the prisoners were listening to them." The singing of Paul and Silas in the midst of their suffering had the attention of the people around them. And I believe that when we choose to sing in our suffering, we can have that same effect on the world around us.